This week on 90 Day Fiancé, the single life Sims 4 Lovestruck edition. Roman was ready for a fresh start in love, but this feeling made him reflect back on his childhood. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. You're watching Justamomthatsims. I'm KT, and I'm here today for a special episode of 90 Day Fiancé, the single life Sims 4 Lovestruck edition. This is a prequel episode. Though Roman Wu now lives in Sulani, our prequel story starts in a little house in Windenburg. Roman grew up in a very loving home with his mother, Scarlett Wu, and his father, Aiden Wu. Aiden and Scarlett had a loving relationship, and Roman grew up knowing what real love was. He and his mother used to cook together. Even though she was not the world's greatest cook, it was about the quality time that they spent together. His father would often walk up behind his mother in the kitchen, hug her from behind, and he would say, "Son, are you keeping your mother in line in this kitchen?" Because they both knew that she did not make the best dishes. It was a fun household. They laughed a lot. They smiled a lot. They ate the terrible food together. Those times were some of the happiest times in Roman's life, and he thought that it would always be this way with him and his family. Roman also loves the outdoors, and as he thought back, he can remember that he got this love of the outdoors from his parents. They always spent time outside. They would hunt for frogs, and even when his mother or father had to be on the phone from work, they worked outside. His father would scoop him up into the biggest hugs, and if he thought really hard, he could almost still feel the impression of that hug today. Some days, Roman and his father would spend hours talking outside, or at least it seemed that way. Roman was well known around town, and sometimes he would walk all by himself across the river. There were rocks there, and he enjoyed crossing it, and his parents would always tell him to just be safe and don't slip. So many things about Roman's personality today could be traced back to his childhood. He loves to fish still, and that was because he and his mother and his father too at times would always fish together. They would go out in the early mornings on the weekend when there was no school, and they would fish and fish for hours and hours. They would take everything that they caught and they would put it in the fridge because they would cook those fish up later. But sometimes they caught things that weren't fish. One time he remembered his mother catching a big bundle of seaweed, and his dad just laughed and laughed. But these times were mostly reserved for mother and son. Roman and his mother Scarlett would also spend time talking here. She would talk to him about what he thought his future might look like. She would talk about her hopes and dreams. One of Roman's favorite memories was when his family took him to the Snow Festival of Light. He even got a semi-capsule from the Mountain Man. His mother, Scarlett, and his father, Aiden, looked on, and then they joined right in with the play. That day, he remembered getting the best hug ever from his mother, Scarlett, or at least it felt that way at the time. He played on the ice jungle gym, and then they built snowmen with all of the people that were around. It was a big group effort, but they got 3 snow pals built that day. Roman even named one, and to this day he will sometimes build back that exact same snow pal because that was one of the greatest moments of his childhood. That was the first time they had been on an actual vacation together after his dad Aiden got a bonus at work. Roman remembered eating ice that day right off of the ground, even though his mother fussed about that just a little bit. But the highlight of the night was the fireworks and doing the mountain move with the Mountain Man. He would never forget that trip of a lifetime. Sometimes his mother and father liked to spend quality time together at a park nearby the house. Roman would stay at home sleep. His father Aiden and his mother would go out swimming. Well, little did Roman know, his father Aiden and his mother Scarlett would sometimes go for some adult time to skinny dip in the bog water. It was nice and warm even when it was cold outside, but on this night Aiden was too tired. His legs felt heavy, his arms felt heavy, and he went under. He didn't even have time to yell for help. And it started to rain, but he could not feel the raindrops because it was too late. Aiden was drowning. Scarlett did not know what was happening. She could not see him, but she noticed the rain and thought, gosh, we should go home because it is starting to thunderstorm. But she saw her husband and she dived right in and went under the water to try to locate him. She felt like it wasn't too late, like she could help him, even as she knew it was, but the storm was raging on, and this was very dangerous. And out of nowhere, the lightning struck, and down Scarlett went. there was no one left for poor Roman. The Grim Reaper was here, and he claimed every soul. What would this mean for Roman? He was still a child. Where would he go? What would his future look like? He only had one uncle, his mother's brother Carter, and he was a world traveler. He didn't even know how to reach him. His uncle would get in contact with his mother when he was back on the grid. The Sim Social Services stepped in, and they got in contact with the only living relative that they could reach, and that was Shelly Montano. Shelly was Roman's great grandmother, and his father had not had contact with her ever that Roman could remember, and there was a very good reason why. You see, Shelly hated children. She was horrible to Aiden's mother, and Aiden's mother was very careful to keep Aiden away from her growing up. Therefore, Roman had never had contact with Shelly, and it was a good reason. Shelly was evil. She was mean. She hated children, and she made sure that Roman knew it. His life went from one extreme to the other in the matter of a few days. He was living a nightmare. Roman was living in hell. Every day, Shelly berated him for how he dressed, how he talked, how he walked. He would go into the bathroom and try to give him self-pep talks. She made sure that he could not contact any friends that he had before. He was now homeschooled, so he spent most of his time alone. Even when he got sick, Shelly would not help him. So he would doctor on his bear, because if he couldn't be cared for, then he wanted to care for somebody else. This went on for months. Shelly would barely cook. Many days, Roman would eat corn on the cob, and he knew how to make Pop-Tarts, and he could also make grilled cheese sandwiches in the microwave. But one day, Roman thought Shelly was giving him a gift, and he should have known, but he didn't. He was a child. It was a fart in a box. Shelly was a horrible person, and he didn't know how long he could do this. How much longer could he be isolated? How much longer could he be sick and not get help? How many more times could he be told that he was worthless? How many more times could he be afraid in his own home, a place where he used to feel safe? He used to feel secure. On the other side of the world in Sulani, Carter Robbins was cooking and thinking he was going to call his baby sister Scarlett as soon as he finished. They were as close as siblings could be, but Carter was a world traveler and in the military. There were simply times where he was off the grid, but before he could do that, he received a call from one of his neighbors. His neighbor and good friend was telling him that some people had come by, and unfortunately, his sister had passed away. Carter couldn't believe it. He instantly felt a pit in the bottom of his stomach, but he knew that he needed to get to his nephew Roman, and he had a spare room, but he needed to fix it up real fast because Scarlett had left explicit instructions that if anything ever happened to her, that Carter was to raise Roman. Across the world, back in Windenburg, Roman was starting to rebel, so this time when Shelly yelled at him, he stumped his foot and he yelled back. But his Uncle Carter was walking up, and he was hearing the loud argument, so he decided that he was going to put a stop to this. Why was Shelly yelling at his nephew like this? He didn't know Shelly, but he had heard about her, and he wanted to be clear that he would not put up with any abuse of his nephew. Carter went to the back after that was done to talk to Roman, letting him know to quickly pack your bags. I'm your Uncle Carter. I will make sure that you get to know me, but right now I have to get you out of this home. You're coming to live with me in Sulani. Roman began his new life in Sulani with his Uncle Carter. At first, his uncle made him nervous. He was a big guy, he was strong, and Roman was a little afraid due to his past experiences, but he soon found out that Carter was a gentle giant. He showed him love, he got him grief counseling, and he let him know that he was going to be there for him and that whatever Roman needed, Carter was going to provide that. He tucked him in every night. He encouraged him to go to school and make friends. He gave him patience when he needed that, because sometimes the road was bumpy. And in those times, Roman would go to bed and Carter would go outside and work out. But he never got frustrated with Roman. Carter would read to Roman, and Roman started to have a new feeling, a feeling that was actually old. And as he aged up to a teenager, he couldn't imagine his life without this man who not only took in his sister's child, but loved him unconditionally. And Roman knew that when he grew up, he would help other people find unconditional love, and he would have it for himself. Back over in Windenburg, there was a severe moldinitis. For you see, Shelly was a slob. She never cleaned up. She hated to clean. She hated to cook. She hated anything domestic. And there was a toxic mold growing. And sure enough, over time, Shelly developed toxic moldinitis, and there was no one there to help her. And as she turned into something from a scene of The Last of Us and took her last shuddering breath. As she passed away with no one in sight, no one to be near her to comfort her, Shelley Montano knew that karma had finally caught up with her. But it was too late to ask for redemption. It was too late to ask for forgiveness because, as I said before, the Grim Reaper comes for everyone. And no child would be subjected to Shelley again. In present-day Sulani, Roman is now an adult. He is 32 years old, and he has decided that he is going to change career paths. He is still going to be a professional violinist, but he is now ready to step into his role as a matchmaker. Roman knows deep down that being a romance consultant is for him. He has matched plenty of people around Sulani, and he's ready to take this show on the road. But first, he had to convince his Uncle Carter to move with him. The gentle giant was now aging, and Roman knew the importance of valuing the time that you had left together. So they had decided to move to Ciudad Enamorada together. Carter did make Roman promise that although he's going to be a romance consultant, that he would still play the violin for him from time to time, and he readily agreed. The next time you see Roman, it will be in a Lovestruck world. This has been a Just a Mom That Sims production, and remember, until next time, keep simming, be happy, and always have a blessed day. Bye bye.